On a beautiful June morning on a beach in Kennebunk, there are slightly detectable movements among the seaweed and the sand. Looking closer, one can see small white birds darting around. These are piping plovers. Once common on the beaches of Maine in the 1800s, they are now on Maine's and the National Endangered Species List. There were 66 pairs in Maine in 2002, and by 2008, only 24 pairs remained. Thanks to the efforts of organizations like Maine Audubon, that number is now gradually increasing. 7 pairs of Maine's piping plovers make their summer home on Goose Rocks Beach in Kennebunk. Jody Jones, wildlife ecologist for Maine Audubon, explains the significance of these birds and the factors that threaten their existence.
Piping plovers are an integral part of our ecosystem. We have an obligation to be stewards of the land and stewards of our wildlife, and we should protect all the pieces. The primary threat to piping plovers is habitat loss. We've stabilized a number of our beaches, we've put a lot of our houses, and we have a lot of recreational pressure on our beaches. After habitat loss, probably the primary threat is predation, and we have predators that have moved in along with people and can live very well with people. Animals like foxes and crows and skunks and raccoons all can prey on the eggs or the chicks. And so that secondarily, predators that have come along with humans are a threat to piping plovers. And then we have the normal things. They are habitat specialists. They nest in an area that is influenced by the tide. It's a very dynamic environment, and they're specialized in this area. Some people say, oh, why do those birds nest in such a dynamic area where the tides can come and ruin their nests? It's because no other species is adapted like this species to do it. So tides and foul weather can also threaten their productivity. Goose Rocks has almost a third of Maine's population, so this is one of the most productive sites in Maine, and it's privately owned, and we work with landowners here to protect the birds. One of the reasons Goose Rocks Beach is so important to piping plovers is because of its location. Back behind me we have an estuary that is protected by Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge, and it provides a lot of nutrients that come out through the river here, the Batson River, and provide a wonderful foraging environment in the sand flats in front of the beach. And we also have an incredible sand dune system that also is providing habitat for the piping plovers to nest in. The intertidal area at Goose Rocks Beach goes out hundreds of yards. It's excellent foraging habitat. And so when the chicks hatch, they feed themselves, they go off into the sand flats, up into the dune area. The rack line, or the seaweed that washes up on the beach, also provides nutrients for invertebrates or amphipods, small insects that live in and around the rack line. So it's important to keep the beach as natural as possible and not clean it up and remove it. It adds nutrients to the sand, helps the beach grass grow, and also is wonderful foraging areas for the piping plovers. There's an adult running. Their name, piping plover, comes from the piping, the clear bell-like whistle piping sound that they make. They will use that piping sound to try to lure you away and protect their chicks or their nest. Piping plovers arrive in Maine in April, and we're always really excited when the first one shows up. We have people calling into Maine Audubon and saying, I saw the piping plovers at Goose Rocks Beach. They arrive, they set up their territories, they're territorial, and they defend those territories, and the females select the males. And usually by the 1st of May, we get the first nests that are laid. They lay 4 eggs, an egg every day and a half to 2 days. Once the clutch is full with 4 eggs, 28 days later, the chicks will hatch. So usually in June, we start getting a lot of hatching happening if their first nesting is successful. If for some reason the nest is destroyed by a tide or by a predator, they will re-nest, and that will push that whole nesting cycle further into the summer. By the 4th of July, where we're all interested in looking at fireworks and celebrating, that's when the peak chick hatching usually happens, and that's also when the birds no longer can re-nest because it's too late in the season. Usually by the middle of August, all the birds are done with their nesting and their breeding, but typically even earlier than that if their first nesting attempt is successful. Maine Audubon has been leading the effort to protect these birds since 1981, but we haven't done it alone. We need the cooperation of landowners. The Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife has been a cooperator from day one. Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge, which is part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has also been a collaborator, and municipalities. There's a lot that the average person can do to help protect these birds. Many of us go to visit beaches during the summer. You can take your trash with you when you leave. You can avoid the stake and twine areas that have the restricted area signs. You can avoid flying kites over their nesting areas because piping plovers perceive those kites as aerial predators. They'll go off their nest and they'll spend way too much time trying to get your kite away from their nest. Just about every landowner I've worked with and asked if we could get some management on their property have collaborated with me. And I feel very fortunate that I work here in Maine because the people here in Maine care about their natural environment and have for a very long time. They're the most adorable little birds that you could lay your eyes on, and it's an incredible boost, and I think it feeds our spirit when we see something that beautiful in our environment and something that we've worked hard to correct. It feeds our soul.
This is Tom Handel in Kennebunk for Community Update.